He said it was a frightful experience for him, really. And they wrote to me about this afterwards. But he felt inwardly it was helping him, but outwardly he felt very uneasy about this experience. In the meantime, they were writing to me about Baba and this, and I felt slightly drawn, but not really. I was just beginning to tread a small spiritual path and to understand a bit about what life was really about. And I was reading various books which they had fed me. I always felt slightly behind my mother and brother in this path. They fed me little books which they'd read and found interesting, and I was just forming little stepping stones. And really looking back in retrospect, I can see where those stepping stones led me straight to Baba. But I needed them, and I wasn't prepared to accept them straight away. So that in 1958, at the Sahavas at Myrtle Beach, my mother sent me a copy of Listen Humanity. And she wrote in it a lovely thing. And I read this book, and it didn't mean so much to me. I couldn't sort of come to grips with Baba's personal I. It wasn't till later that I understood, and this understanding did happen rather quickly, and perhaps it helped me so much. I understood that when Baba said I, he meant God. And if this was really a turning point in my life. And I suppose I laid that book aside, and I didn't really read it properly, not with my heart. But perhaps maybe in 1960, maybe 59, the end of 59, something like that. And in reading it, I felt, especially the beginning part, that here was somebody absolutely wonderful, but I wasn't prepared to accept Baba at that stage completely. I also was getting the Awakener magazines through a gift from my brother, probably, I can't remember. And I think these magazines also helped me. At the same time, I was reading Krishnamurti, and I was studying a bit of philosophy, and I was reading this and that. And I was more really absorbed in the abstract state of God. The personal God wasn't for me quite yet. I think it was early 1961. We got married in 1960, and I moved down to Christchurch, this lovely place here. And in the early part of 1960, I started writing to Bill LePage in Sydney, inquiring about more books I could get hold of. And Bill and I formed a great friendship through letters. We'd neither met each other, but letters flowed between us over that year and for the next 2 years. In 1962, Bill said, well, in May 1962, there could be a chance of meeting Baba. And I think you shouldn't miss this opportunity. In fact, in retrospect, Baba was already in Australia in 1956 and in 1958, and I was in New Zealand, but I hadn't. 56 and in 1958, and I was in New Zealand, but I hadn't felt drawn to meet him then, and I didn't really know that he was there. It didn't mean that much to him. However, Bill said, you must not miss the East-West gathering, which was scheduled for May, if you remember. So I was prepared to go to this, and I felt this wonderful, and Bill was drawing me to do this. So when it finally came to the point, everything was arranged, and I flew over to Sydney in November, because the East-West gathering was postponed until November at that stage. And I went with a completely open heart, and at this stage I was really convinced of Baba. I didn't need convincing. For me, he was something absolutely real and something tremendous. And I was thoroughly convinced about Baba. So I didn't really feel I needed to meet him, to be convinced about him. But to meet him was the culmination of my life. There was no doubt about that. We flew, Bill, the three of us, and Reg Paffel, we flew direct to Bombay, and the other Australians, I went with the Australian group. I was the only one from New Zealand to go to that gathering. I don't know, I might be the only one in New Zealand who's met Baba at the present time. I don't know. There were certainly New Zealanders in Australia who were also going to that gathering. So here I was, under Bill's care really, with the Australian group, and we flew and we travelled by train into Pune. over those Western Ghats, and all this was in tremendous excitement building up within. I remember in the airplane flying, I had a little picture of Baba on the back of the seat in front of me, and you know, this was something to Baba was sort of growing. And Bill had read me this telegram he'd received just before we were going, saying that Baba was so sick and utterly worn by this tremendous pressures because the Chinese war was on with Russia, and also Cuba. The Cuban situation was just blowing up at the time. There were missiles, the Russians were feeding Cuba with these missiles, and they were all pointing towards the United States, and this was a tremendous world crisis that was on. And Baba usually, I learned from these people that this is the sort of avenue through which Baba draws you. You know, you go through the worst of these tremendous external crises to get to him. So it's in the middle of this, and Baba had written to Bill in Sydney, or sent a telegram saying that he was really crushed by all the pressures, but that it was all right to come, and we must come, and that this was only for his lovers, not for those who were just merely interested in him. So the first day we met Baba was absolutely marvelous. For me, it was the culmination of my life. There he was, sitting in the hall of Guru Prasad. Tremendous excitement building up beforehand. To meet Baba, to join the queue, you had a chance of watching him embrace people. It was absolutely lovely. That embrace of his, when it finally came, was so soft, so gentle, so beautifully loving, absolutely enveloping me, almost blinding me. And at this time I was clutching 3 little flowers I'd taken from the garden. Almost blinding me. And at this time I was clutching 3 little flowers I'd taken from the garden here and preserved them. I preserved them all the way there, and they were still reasonably alive. And I thought, no, these little flowers, I wanted to give these to Baba, but really Baba wasn't interested in flowers. He was interested in people, in me, for instance. I mean, amongst those many people there. And I thought, there's his beautiful lap there. Shall I put these flowers on that lovely lap of his? I thought, no, I better not. So I just put them alongside and said, Baba, I brought you 3 little flowers from our garden in New Zealand. But what I was really trying to say was I brought myself and my whole heart and the whole of the country and everything to you. And Baba, in his lovely smile, just is sort of so accepting and so loving. And this was a most marvelous moment. And I think thoughts in one's mind just sort of thoughts, questioning thought just vanish from one's mind under these circumstances. It was just so wonderful, and then I took my place on the floor, seated amongst the 150 there, and I thought, well, maybe Baba's going to give a discourse or something. But none of that. There was no discoursing, not for that first meeting. Baba would just inquire about all the people and joke with them, and it was absolutely wonderful. Here's a man who says he is God, and I believe is God, and I accept as God in human form. But what does he do? He starts joking amongst people and talking about very trivial things about how they felt, whether they had colds and whether they slept well, and he spent ages talking about these little things, trivial things. I thought, gosh, fine. I mean, he's really concerned about you. So I was just there amongst many, and it was quite difficult sometimes to sit down. There would be someone sitting down with a head maybe in front of you, and you didn't feel like moving your head because maybe you were blocking someone else's view behind. So there were quite a few times sitting in that hall I longed to get closer, and there was Anita Vayad, and the children, mainly Baba had the children sitting right round him. He always had Anita right there at his knee, and for some special reason of his. And I remember behind Baba there was a lovely calendar, which I've got a copy. Some lovely Baba pictures. Because Guru Prasad was marvelous, walking up there at the time with the Australian group, knowing that you were getting closer and closer to Baba and going round that garden and then taking your slippers off and into the hall. And this was a fantastic moment. So we had this wonderful experience for 4 or even 5 days. Baba gave us a 5th day with him at the East-West gathering. And those experiences are so full that to recall every little thing that happened is just very difficult, because for me the whole thing was so full that the little details of it sometimes skipped your mind. Your mind was concentrating on something very vast that I don't really recall very much of the very little details. And I knew my mind was going to be like this. I'd sort of anticipated it, and I thought, well, I'll make some notes, and I did. I made some notes. I made notes of the conversations that Baba had with us through Irwin, and I wrote some of these down, and I thought, conversations that Baba had with us through Irwin, and I wrote some of these down, and I thought, well, this will be helpful when I get back, because I had this feeling that my going to meet Baba was going to have a much fuller and bigger meaning at the time. I may not have quite realized what was happening. I knew that Baba planted seeds in one's heart, and I could see that this is what he was really doing, because I felt really unworthy. I did really feel unworthy to be in the presence of one such as Baba. I also felt slightly guilty in taking the many photographs I did, and even writing things down during my presence with him. But I felt somehow that this was going to be necessary to do, and I'm glad in retrospect that I did do this, although I may have missed some of the impact of his mere presence. But Baba said at the East-West gathering, I'm giving very little of my love at this time. When I break that silence, when I give that word, then you will feel my love. And this is really, I think, how it's been, because since Baba has dropped his body, this is how I feel. This fullness has really come into one. And I'm one of those who believe he has broken that silence, and he has given that word, and will benefit everyone and everything on earth, each in his own time. So I very much feel this at the moment, and I feel it with everyone that comes in Baba's name to inquire about him here. But at the East-West gathering, there were so many lovely experiences, so many wonderful experiences, so rich, and we're just watching the experiences of others that others were having with Baba. And the communication Baba had with everyone. It seemed to me also, this is a lovely point, I think Baba adjusted himself to everyone. Whoever he was meeting, he came down to their level, and at their level. Those who were shy, Baba would feel shy and a bit awkward and didn't know quite what to say to them. Those who were bold and came up and said, he'd do just the same, he knew exactly what to say to them, and he sort of reacted exactly the same way that you felt. And this was so lovely, because it meant that he was right with everyone on their own level. This is the man part of the God coming down at our level and being able to communicate so readily at that heart level, at that man level, because the God part of Baba we couldn't really understand. I felt the majesty of him. I really felt the majesty of him. It was something very potent. And there were moments when I thought they were really rich, when Baba was in a sort of deep contemplative, almost trance-like period, especially in the afternoon sessions, towards the end of those. I remember one time when Baba was like this, giving his blessing to us, and that was, the whole of the pandal was quiet, absolutely quiet, and there was this wonderful feeling, and Baba was quiet up there with his hands like this, and you felt there was something tremendous going on. I was also very aware at the East-West gathering that Baba was working through so many souls, and so many different souls. So many different souls. In fact, the whole strata, the highest to the lowest, the whole strata of mankind was there at the East-West gathering, and has presumably been working, Baba has been working through them all the time, but I felt that we in a way were like puppets on strings, not in the sense that we were inanimate, but in the sense that we were there doing part of Baba's work, or serving part of his work. And this is very important for me, because I feel now, especially coming out and people spreading out, and how Baba's love is spreading out through so many different avenues, that this really started for me, this feeling started at the East-West gathering when I met Baba. But since it's sort of fructified within me, this feeling that everything has been touched through Baba's grace. Everything has been touched and is being touched. But it's under the surface. It's not on the surface. This is on the surface there's turmoil, and I think that's necessary. That'll be there with us for quite a while. Tremendous turmoil. Because when you realize what this world is a sort of catalyst for the cosmos, for everything happening here, as Baba said, this is where we learn the love part of life. And it's necessary. And this world, as Baba said, is the chief planet in the cosmos for this work. So that when I was called to Baba on about the 4th day, personally, Irwin said, Anthony, Baba would like to say a few words to him, to you. I went and sat down at Baba's feet, knelt at Baba's feet, and Baba said, would you like to say something? And I said, Baba, all I really want to say, I just didn't know really what to say, because what was there to say to the God-man? I didn't come to ask questions. I just said, I would like to be an instrument in spreading your love, and in New Zealand. And he said, I can't recall the exact words, it's funny, through earage, but the gist of it was, love for God is all that matters. That's what he said. Love for God is all that matters. So in retrospect, thinking about this afterwards, this is really all that matters. In whatever form God is, this is all that really matters. And this feels very significant to me, and also I have this feeling that his work is going on through such a vast channel. It's like a pebble dropped in the water, and those rings are spreading all the way round, out like this, and touching everything underneath the surface, and not on the surface. This analogy of water is not really quite right, but these rays are going out through all the different channels, because it isn't, to me, a direct channel of those who, through those who know about Baba. I feel very often that one is so unworthy, oneself, to even be an instrument in Baba's love. But as I say, he's working on all levels, so maybe I can... Oneself, to even be an instrument in Baba's love. But as I say, he's working on all levels, so maybe I can do something on my little level. We can all do something on our little level, and it's all going on. It isn't that we have to tell people specifically about Baba. And this is the message he sort of conveyed to me, that it wasn't necessary to go necessarily preaching about Baba to everyone, that it was love for God that mattered, and that love for God reached him in whatever form it came. If it was heartfelt, if it came from the heart, this is what mattered. So really, this is what I got out of that East-West gathering, apart from meeting some wonderful people. My mother came from England, and we met there at the time, and I was in one hotel with the Australian group. My mother was in another hotel with Charles Purdom and a lot of Americans there, and I used to go and meet her in the evening. But always it came back to Baba's meeting. I remember the very last day Baba gave us, Australian group, a special little extra, when he called us in for a few minutes to sing some songs. Actually, Francis was there and wanted us to sing some of his songs with the Australian group. And we went in there with Irwin and his brother, Edward. And we had about a quarter of an hour, 10 minutes with Baba. And Baba told us about the Chinese war, the war with China which was going on. There were banners all over the street, prepare for this and join the army and this and that. But that last meeting with Baba, well, it wasn't the final meeting with Baba, it was very rich, I felt. And Baba was so special. He did this over and over again. He would, apart from giving this tremendous darshan to thousands upon thousands, literally thousands upon thousands, and wearing himself out, this is another thing that occurred to me. Here's this person who's really very frail. He was very frail. He was so compassionate at the same time. His own body didn't matter at all. He gave himself all the time as an example. This was an absolute giving of his own time, body, and feelings. You could see the tension. You could see the tremendous weariness of bowing down and receiving all these gifts and garlands. And Baba, with this worn body and very damaged body, would bear this with a wonderful grace. Wonderful, because being both God and man, his man part of him must have felt very much the same as you and I would under those circumstances. And however, towards the end, we visited the wonderful places like Embellishments and of course Meherzad and Meherbad. And that was marvelous. It was absolutely wonderful meeting those places, going there and seeing these wonderful places where Baba had done work. We stopped at Satara and road where Baba's accident occurred. And I remember someone saying that maybe, I don't know how many years before that accident happened, that Baba was playing cricket with the Mandali in a paddock, in a field fairly close by, this very